Welcome to the Stoned Heen View, a podcast series which interviews a range of sport club representatives and leading professional sport personnel during the COVID-19 shutdown period. We find out what these people are doing during the current health crisis, with some of our most popular sports seasons postponed. I'm Mark Heenan. Today we are doing episode 43 of the Stoned Heen View Summer Series. Today I've actually got a guest on. He is the co-event director of the Wreck2Reef. His name is Andrew Dix, and Andrew is joining us on the Stoned Heen View podcast summer series. So it's lovely to have Andrew on the program, and we welcome you to the Stoned Heen View, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, and it's great to join you, and looking forward to a lovely day for our swim coming up.
Absolutely, and we have had a bit of a discussion already regarding the program and doing this event, or I've been in charge of this event for a fairly lengthy period. It's in its 12th year, but some of the challenges in the lead up to this event are probably challenges that you haven't faced before due to a pandemic. Just talk about, I suppose, give us a bit of a snapshot of the timeline when, not so much you found out about the pandemic, but the planning around the Wreck2Reef and what the meetings were like sort of mid last year. Because I imagine an event like this, a fair bit of planning goes into it, months and months in advance. And obviously you would have a fair bit of planning prior to or the end of the event from last year.
As you said, we do plan for the next one. We start that the day after we finish the one we've currently done. And I suppose we were going around the normal activities involved in getting the event up and running, and it wasn't really until we started speaking to the broader swimming community and the people that were holding other swims, we were finding out that we were probably the only swim that was going to happen. And we suddenly thought, really think through this and understand both, I suppose, the reasons why some other swims weren't going to go ahead, and what could we do? Why were we able to run an event, and what were we needing to do to run an event safely? And probably the biggest factor in our favour was the size of our swim, which built up to a level of about 350 last year. But when you compare that to things like the Lawn Pier, the pub, which has many thousands of people involved in it, the impracticalities of running an event that size due to COVID were things that we thought we could manage with a smaller event. So that's what, on that basis, we decided to press ahead.
Have you spoken to many other events, and particularly, I'm aware that there was a Portsea event that was held in January and might have been one of the first competitive swims that was held. Obviously, some swims are not so much being cancelled, but they've been run in a virtual format. Can you get any intellect, or can you get any feedback on how some of these swims are running during COVID?
Yeah, over probably the last quarter of last year and into this year, we've spent a lot of time talking to primarily the people that support the running of the events. So these are the Tomato Timing, the Surf Lifesaving Club that does all the on-water safety, and the Register Now people that manage all the registrations. And between the three of us, we've sort of worked out a COVID-safe way to run an event, which is how Mount Martha were actually, I think, the first major event to run, which ran at on the Australia Day weekend. So, and they probably put those processes into practice for the first time, and there were certainly good learnings for that. And the best was the fact that what we thought would work is going to work, and so we'll be doing exactly the same for our event. Largely it involves around trying to reduce the time that swimmers need to be at the event, also encouraging separation of swimmers and observers, particularly keeping things like starting and finishing lines well apart, having dedicated areas for the swimmers so that there isn't a lot of people milling around. We've also unfortunately had to not run a couple of the smaller events, particularly for kids and novices, which involve a lot of people getting together, and parents and young kids, and that really isn't something, unfortunately, that we could run this year safely. So we're running the two major events, which is the 1.2k and the 2.5k swims, which are really for the swimmers. When we've been speaking to the swimming community, they're really just saying, look, thank you for putting something on. We don't really care if we have to do things differently this year. We just want to come somewhere and swim. We don't worry if there aren't big presentations. We don't need a big show and dance put on. We just want to come, have a swim and go home. And that's really the whole basis of the flow of people, is to allow them to do that.
What are some of the things that you've had to do during COVID, like in preparation for this swim? I mean, I assume, I don't know how committee meetings run with the Indented Head Yacht Club, but I assume that you would have to, be using Zoom for one with your other people on the committee talking about this fundraiser and obviously the sailing programs that the club has.
Yeah, well, I mean, all our meetings over the year have been via Zoom, where they're normally in person. I mean, we had a number of our committee members, well, me included, who were locked up in Melbourne while, people were down on the Bellarine. So it became really hard. As a yacht club, we had to cease all activity in March suddenly. So, our season was sort of pulled out from under us. We weren't even allowed to organise working bees over the winter to get the club and the equipment ready to start the season again in October. So, it was really difficult for us to do anything. Fortunately, we were able to start the sailing season in October, but again, because of the restrictions in place, we couldn't run two-man yachts in the fleet because you can't socially distance on a two-person yacht. Things like that. We couldn't run training for adults because two adults weren't allowed to be in a boat together. So we couldn't have a coach and a trainee in a boat together. So, there's a number of things we had to do to either defer activities or change activities. Even we put on a major fundraising event normally over the January period. We couldn't do that this year because the hall we hold it in, that normally holds 200 people, has got a maximum capacity of 50. So simple things like that just makes it hard, particularly for small clubs where we rely on raising money to conduct our activities. And when you can't do those sorts of things, it makes it really hard to run a program. And so we were really keen to keep the swim going because we knew that would probably be the only fundraising activity that we could do. Hopefully the fact that it was in February means that, touch wood, we'll be able to do it.
And of course, the swim is in its 12th year. I think initially it was held around the start of March, and now it's around that time slot of early to mid-Feb. The work that's been done over previous years, you've been a key integral part of that. But so just talk about the early origins on how that sort of started, because I understand that there were a group of swimmers that were sort of swimming around. You will famously put out the ozone, which is the wreck. There was some talks with the Indented Head Yacht Club on how they could help in putting on a fundraiser, but get a swim together so people in the community could join.
Yeah, well, look, it had an interesting and relatively sudden and unexpected start. 12 years ago when we ran the first event. It was Tom O'Connor who we have to thank for the original approach. He's I could say keen, but probably closer to say fanatical swimmer, and committed to the Bellarine, and particularly the Northern Bellarine, and trying to do everything he can to promote the Northern Bellarine. And there really was very little activity on the Northern Bellarine in terms of anything. He approached us I think it was in January of the year we ran the first event, and said, I want you guys to run a swim. I'll get you some sponsors. I guarantee I'll get over 100 people there for you. It's easy, all you got to do is throw a couple of boys in the water and Bob's your uncle. And we sort of looked at it and thought, oh boy, we're a yacht club, not a swim club. So we thought, how the hell are we going to know anything about running a swim? Tom, to his credit, wouldn't let us say no, even though we tried. Although when we were doing research, we realised that we couldn't do on-water safety ourselves, because when we approached our insurance company, ran a mile and said, no way can we give you cover for running an event like that. You'd have to take out separate cover, or the cost of which was going to be more than the revenue we'd make out of the swim. So that's when we first thought of the idea of approaching a life-saving club who have all the insurances already to run these sorts of events. And the key really was getting them on side to provide on-water safety. And for the first few years, we actually used the Point Lonsdale Surf Life Saving Club in that role. And once they said they'd be prepared to get involved, it really that was the main hurdle for us. And then we said, well, okay, let's give it a go and see what happens. And so we gave it a go and saw what happened. And I think we had about 150 swimmers for the first event. Very successful day. It's really gone from strength to strength since then, such that, a lot of swimmers were coming to our swim every year, which was really good. But the one thing we weren't is a part of the Great Victorian Swim Series, which is something run by Cousins Travel. And it's huge in Victoria. Victoria,
It
and
is.
has a program, normally of over 20 swims
Mm.
each year. And, people earn points from competing in swims and for prizes and all sorts of things. And so when speaking to the organisers of that this year, they were really keen to get us involved. But then when they found out we were going to be one of the only events on, they became even keener to get us involved. They've done a lot of work to help promote it.
They have. Apart from the fact, I mean, I got to know Cousins a bit through the Ocean Grove swim, where I'm a member, but also I've been an event partner with the Queenscliff 180 swim, and they've been involved with those two swims. And I think in some ways it's about generating a bit of a tradition, and to have one on the Ballerine. I mean, it's unique in a lot of ways because a lot of the other Ballerine swims are, I suppose, predominantly based in the surf, and you're on the bay. But the Great Victorian Swim Series, you obviously have the Mornington, Cerberus and Williamstown, which is going to be after the Wreck2Reef. Do you feel that this can be the start of something, and by having the situation that we have with COVID was an advantage to have the Great Victorian Swim Series come on board for the Wreck2Reef?
The irony is in this year we're likely to have a record fleet and more swimmers than we've ever had before, purely because there are such limited opportunities for the swimmers to come and compete anywhere. We've always been really surprised in the swim, even when we weren't part of the series, that most of the swimmers didn't come from the Bellarine or Geelong area. More came from Melbourne and even Greater Victoria than from the Bellarine. So, the swimmers are keen to go anywhere there's an event on. This year, it gives them a really great opportunity for the ones that haven't been to our event before to come down and see how great the Northern Bellarine is and how great our little event is. Hopefully we'll become regular attendees as we become a regular component of what's hopefully a more normal series next year.
I think one of the important things this year is that you're part of that Indented Head Yacht Club committee, and just quickly give us a snapshot of that. But this year or this summer with the school holidays that we've just had, is that the kids were able to be involved in a sailing holiday program, which I think was over 4 days. And I spoke to your other co-event director, Ned Fairley, about that. So he was quite helpful in talking about that. But that's not something that you've always done. And the cost for the kids involved that were participating in that, they might have been first time in a sailing boat. So they're learning the basics of sailing. But essentially, some of those programs that maybe other sailing and yacht clubs host, might be looking at, $500. But in this case, I think it was around $200. And the kids were able to have a lot of fun, and you had morning and afternoon sessions.
Our philosophy on these, running the training programs is always to try and encourage people to take up the sport of sailing. It was certainly never to run things at a profit. If we can put 20 kids through a program and get 4 or 5 of them committed to sailing and join up as members, and particularly get their whole families and parents joining up, that's really what we're about. So we've always run the programs at a loss, and we've only been able to do that because of running events like this swim to raise the funds to enable us to run those programs at a loss. As well as that, we also purchase the boats and equipment that all the kids need. So they're pretty expensive, and so we couldn't, without that, we couldn't run the programs, and we couldn't give the kids those experiences, which this year for the first time, the other thing we've done, as well as running the January program that you mentioned, is we've actually hired a professional coach. Previously it was done by volunteers. This year, through having a professional coach, we've been able to give kids a better quality experience and better targeted, learning how to sail and learning the various skills and things that they need. And we've really been blown away by the numbers. I mean, a lot of the programs have been booked out. How
does the Indented Head Yacht Club raise funds outside of the Wreck2Reef? I mean, what other fundraisers do you have involved with the club on a calendar basis?
Well, this has traditionally been the biggest one. The other one that I mentioned earlier was the event that we run over the Christmas period, when we sort of run a trivia night for the people in the camping ground in the local community hall, which is a good fun night. That does raise quite a sizable amount of money, but we couldn't run that this year. So, that gives us a hole in our budget for a start. So hopefully the increased numbers in the swim event this year will offset that.
You've got a lot of things that the Indented Head Yacht Club sort of stands for. I mean, it's a big part of the community. I mean, even when I managed to speak to John Walter, he lives really close by, so his finger's always on the pulse. He's works as a local real estate agent in the region, and he's the race starter. But essentially, the Wreck2Reef is an important part of the Northern Bellarine, and then you've got the Sunset Run that's going to be held on the same day. the Flying Brick Sunset Run, and they've been running in tandem for a while. I don't know how to summarise this, but tell us about the involvement there with that corresponding event, the Flying Brick Sunset Run, and how many members do you have at the Indented Head Yacht Club?
Yeah, we've probably got over 100 members now, which has been we've had some steady growth sort of since we started doing the training program. We have got an impetus of new members and particularly families joining the club, which was our objective in the first place. In relation to the run, we've been a watering station for the runners for every year that it's run. So we've agreed with the event organisers that we'll provide they have sort of water and food stations along the route of the run, and we provide that. The members get there and we fire up the barbecue and put some sausages on and a few drinks and things for the members. Unfortunately, the runners can't have any of that, although a few of them have been tempted over the years. It's a good way to get us all down there on the beach and to cheer and support the runners as they come past. And of course, this year there will be less of those because under the COVID restrictions, again, they can't have as many people at the event as they've traditionally had.
Yeah, because I think it's been booked out previously. And it's great that these partners, whether they're the local businesses, and one that stands out is the community bank in the Bendigo Community Bank, because even last year they were sort of involved in both events. And in this podcast, we actually did a podcast from the Port Arlington Golf Club with the head professional, and was actually sponsored by Community Bank on the Ballerine, which is the Drysdale and Port Arlington branches. So they've always been a support to this event, and also the Flying Brick Sunset Run, because they know that it's a lot about the community.
No, well, they came on board in day one and they've been with us ever since. So they're a fantastic supporter. It really is, because I think that the model that they work there is based on giving back to the community, and in return, they want the community to be their customers. So it's a good circle. They provide a service to the local community in banking, and they plough the profits back into the local community, so the local community benefits from it. I mean, it is just a fantastic business model, particularly in small communities, like the Northern Bellarine. It is a low socio-economic area. Clubs like us, we're totally run by volunteers. There's no staff involved. We can't afford to pay staff to do everything. It's really only the efforts of the volunteers that enable us to provide a service. It's just a whole group of us that love sailing and love putting on sailing events. The help that sponsors like the Bendigo Bank can make, just in terms of making it easier for us to operate, and helping us get some financial certainty around our future, is just, we certainly couldn't thank the Bendigo Bank enough. They're an amazing sponsor.
Neville Richards Wreck2Reef. You can't do these things without having a major sponsor, and Neville Richards is a big part of the Northern Bellarine. They've been involved with this event for a few years, and obviously they're busy selling real estate on the northern part of the Bellarine, but it's Luke from also involved with Neville Richards is doing a great job, and it's great to have their partnership on board as well as those other partners as well, but in particular Neville Richards.
Yeah, look, I think having a naming right sponsor of the profile of Neville Richards is really good for the profile of our event. You just see all the signage up around the Bellarine at the moment with, Neville Richards, Wreck2Reef swim. You can't sort of go on a road on the Bellarine and not see one. We've got the big billboards in front of the yacht club. What we're all both trying to do here is raise the profile of the Northern Bellarine and as a destination. I think that's certainly one of the reasons why Neville Richards likes to be involved with our swim, is the majority of our swimmers aren't from the Bellarine. So they get to experience the Bellarine for maybe the first time when they come to the swim, and they see and hear of Neville Richards, and you've just got to again go around the Northern Bellarine. They got a lot of billboards on a lot of houses. I think it works really well as a promotional avenue for them, as well as great support for us to enable us to put on the event, which, as you would know, they're not cheap to run. There's a large fixed cost involved in running these events, and for a small club like us that is really only volunteer focused and runs on the smell of an oily rag, we certainly can't afford to lose money on things like this. So having a naming rights sponsor who's prepared to commit to the event really just takes a lot of pressure off us.
Yeah, just a couple of quick ones. That's exactly right. They help a lot with the signage. do they have a certain term, how long they're locked in for the event? And whereabouts are their offices? They've got offices, from what I understand, in Drysdale and Port Arlington.
Yeah, also in St Leonards, they've got a major office there as well. So yeah, they're pretty much based in every town on the northern Bellarine. We haven't got them locked in at this point for anything, but they've just always loved being a part of it, and we hope that the partnership with us and them, will stay positive and be a really long-term partnership, because we both get something really good out of it.
What attracted you to getting into sailing and the Indented Head Yacht Club in the first place? Like, how long does your involvement exist within the Indented Head Yacht Club? Because a lot of things have changed in certain years. Not so much the soil erosion, but where the location is. It's pretty much banked right on. It's really close to the road, and as you come into the Indented Head, so it's one of the first things that I see when on the left hand side. But what attracted you to sailing and getting involved in the Indented Head Yacht Club?
Well, it was my grandfather who first started me sailing. He was a sailor, and we had a holiday house at Indented Head. We lived in Geelong, and so we always used to go down to Indented Head for holidays. And my grandfather was a keen fisherman and sailor, and so once I got old enough, he started teaching me how to sail. There was no yacht club at Indented Head in those days. The history of club sailing in Indented Head dates back to the Indented Head Boat Club rather than the yacht club, who had been around for a long time. A group of the parents of young children in Indented Head realised that there was nothing to keep the kids in Indented Head and stop them going to all those horrible surf beaches and spend all our day at Point Lonsdale and Ocean Grove and Barwon Heads and instead of staying at Indented Head. So they thought, well, let's maybe start a sailing club. And that was really the genesis of sailing in there. And after a few years, a number of the people holidaying at Indented Head saw what was happening and thought, well, we love sailing. And so all started to come around. And the Indented Head Yacht Club was formed about 3 years after that. And it must have been around, I think officially, around 1971, I think, the club was formed. Late 60s is when the sailing started with the boat club. I've actually been a member of the club from day one. Been a few years.
Yes, and I'm sure that you've seen a lot of changes since the advent of the sailing club, but it's great that you can talk about that. Obviously, just before we talk about just wrapping up and going through the certain things that you require for the Wreck2Reef coming up, but it's almost iconic, and every year you have the Wreck2Reef. You can't forget quickly about the ozone. Just give us the quick story behind that and the paddle steamer.
Well, there's many stories about the ozone, and everybody claims that their version of it is true, but I'll give you one version, which is the one part that is true was that the ozone used to run one of the paddle steamers that ran between Melbourne and Port Arlington. There were a number of them, and the ozone was one of them back in the old steam days. When it got past its useful life, it was going to be sunk at Indented Head to provide a bit of an artificial reef and some shelter for Half Moon Bay. The captain had brought the ship down to Indented Head and anchored it, and then they went off and had a big party on the shore. A big storm erupted. The ozone broke its moorings and beached itself where it currently is. So it was always going to be at Indented Head, but wasn't originally planned to be where it is. But anyway, that's it. I mean, when it was first, my mother tells me when it was first sunk there, all the superstructure still existed, and they used to hold dances on the boat because the superstructure was above the waterline. There's not much of it left now, and it'll be a real shame when it goes, because it really is an icon of Indented Head, the wreck of the old ozone paddle steamer.
Well, it is an iconic part of the Wreck2Reef, and when you're taking photos, like when I'm down there taking photos on the event day, you're getting the wreck in the background as the swimmers, whether they're doing the 2.5 or the 1.2, particularly the 2.5, you can see that as the backdrop. So you think that's still got a bit of life in it, that it won't just sink just yet?
Well, I hope not. I mean, the 2.5 has swim straight past it, and it is, those paddle steamers are a part of Victoria's history. Unfortunately, what we've got left of the ozone is all we have left of any of the paddle steamers that used to, run across the bay from Melbourne to various places, which Port Arlington, I think they also ran to Sorrento and other places. So it's a shame that none of them are around, or one of them isn't in the museum somewhere, but such is life.
Well, that's right. And look, Andrew, it's been good to talk about and reminisce about that and your days and how you got involved in the yacht club and got into sailing, but also a bit about the historical aspects of not just the event, but where the ozone is. And there are going to be some COVID parameters this coming February for the Wreck2Reef, which is in its 12th edition. Just talk about a couple of things here with the spectators, the food vendors and the bus. So normally you have a bus that takes you to the 2.5 start. I understand there might be like a walking trail that will go to that part of the bay.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, we can't do the bus.
Do the bus?
No, but it's about I timed the walk. It's about a 12-minute walk. So we've told swimmers allow 15. They could drive there if they wished. It's a couple of minute drive, but again, it's a relatively short walk, which they need to do. I mean, the other things they need to do this year is all swimmers must have pre-registered online.
Mm-hmm.
So we're unable to take any on-day registrations. Literally, if you haven't registered online, you won't be able to compete. The way then that people get their timing bands will be all hands-free based on a message that's sent to their mobile phones. So, the numbers in the registration area will obviously be limited. So, we're encouraging people don't arrive late, get there early. Yeah, we will be providing coffee, which is the coffee van from Bean Craven will be there, along with the yacht club running a barbecue, but that's all the vendors that'll be there. Yep. I mean, the coffee van, we need the coffee van because we're there from daylight setting up. If he wasn't there, I think all our volunteers would go on strike. So they'll be there, and we're certainly trying to separate spectators from competitors as much as possible, as much as you can do on a public beach. But I suppose the other key change is we normally encourage all the swimmers to hang around for a presentation at the end, where not only do we give them medals, we give them sort of prizes of sort of Northern Bellarine produce. We're not doing any of that this year, so we will be announcing winners after each event and handing out the medals, at which point the swimmers are free to go, if they wish. That should lead to less numbers as people sort of, more slowly drift away after their various events.
Last year, you had a very interesting day where there were very choppy conditions. I mean, the sun was out. It was probably one of the toughest for the swimmers in the 11 years of the Wreck2Reef. Do we have a weather forecast in advance at the moment?
Well, not yet, but put it this way, the fact that we've only had one bad weather in 11, odds are the water will be a lot smoother than it was last year. Yeah, here's hoping, and I'm sure a number of people will be watching the weather forecast keenly. We were very lucky last year, even with the rough weather we had. By the afternoon, it was even rougher. So while we could swim in the morning, we probably wouldn't have been able to swim in the afternoon if the event was held then. So luckily by then we were all packed up and the swimmers were ashore and we were recovering.
Well, you don't really want to be picky.
Is the water. Nothing you can do about it. If it's rough, it's rough.
Well, if you're not a strong swimmer out there, particularly if you're doing the 2.5 or a 1.2K, obviously look at the conditions on the day. But I guess that's one of the things that if you're registered, you're encouraging people to do the registrations beforehand because you're not doing it on the day. Yeah. Is there a possibility that this could be sold out before the event date?
There is a strong possibility of that. Yep, we're at about 360 at the moment, and we've got an absolute cap of 500. And so we've got 140 to go. I mean, it's interesting. The keen swimmers actually loved the rough water last year. Shows how mad they all are. But the one thing we did do for the 1.2 kilometre swimmers last year was we changed the direction of that course so that when they were out to sea, they were swimming with the waves rather than against them. Couldn't do that for the 2.5K, but we did it for the 1.2s, and a lot of them thanked us for that too, because a lot of them had swum the 2.5 and were pretty tired, and then they're actually the 1.2 became a relatively easy swim, albeit there were still some big waves.
I might have to tell Gina from the Great Victorian Swim Series that maybe not this year because the presentations are going to look a bit different because of the COVID, but see if we can get like a jersey, like a yellow jersey, like the Tour de France or something like that, just to see who's on the podium. There's a few of the swims ran before the Wreck2Reef to see who's the current leader. I mean, I know it's an enjoyable swim, but I think we'll add a little bit to the event. Maybe if you're going to be part of the Great Victorian Swim Series, see if we can get a little bit of a running update on who's leading the Great Victorian Swim Series.
We'll certainly, and we'll hope to get them all there to boost their points balances.
Let's be honest here, it might be a swim for the first timers, a lot of them, because they mightn't have ventured over to this side of the bay, or as in, the Ballerine side. So it'll be a good first experience.
Given the numbers, Mark, a number of the swimmers are going to be first-time Wreck2Reef swimmers. They're certainly not first-time swimmers, but they'll be first-time Wreck2Reef swimmers. So hopefully Indented Head puts on a beautiful days for them, and they'll all realise what a great place it is. Although we don't want too many people to find out it's a great place.
You want to have sort of be a hidden gem, but calm northerly conditions would be something that you would ask for in the morning on the Wreck2Reef. So just get in touch and just tell us those details on how the swimmers can registrate. Obviously, if you can go to the Indented Head website, but there is actually a posting, or there's a URL, a website address that they need to go to do the registration.
Look, the easiest thing to do is just go to ihyc.com.au, and you'll see there's a click box for the Wreck2Reef, and you'll be able to go. That'll take you straight to register now, who can do all the registration for you. It's a simple online process. They can type in IHYC, they can type in Wreck2Reef. It'll all take them to the same place. So it's fairly easy to do. So.
Well, thanks, Andrew, for joining us on this special podcast, which is in the lead up to the 2021 Wreck2Reef. It's now in its 12th edition. It's going to be hosted by the Indented Head Yacht Club. They put this event on every year, and it's definitely a favourite throughout the course of February. So we wanted to thank you for coming on the Stoned Heen View podcast to talk about the Wreck2Reef for this year, and good luck in organising the event.
Yeah, no, thanks, Mark. Thanks for your time, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the day. Hopefully 500 other swimmers at the time, and a beautiful day.
Absolutely, Andrew, and it'll be a great event to be a part of. So you can get in contact at any stage in mind. If you have a guest from sport, you can check out the Stoned Heen View, type it into Facebook. We're also on Instagram as well. Our podcast is also available on Apple Podcasts. The Stoned Heen View is also on Spotify, and our launching platform is Podbean. The Stoned Heen View has a YouTube channel and a Twitter account, which is at Stoned Heen View. And if you want to write us a review, or you want to get in mind with a contact from another sport, or this is something a little bit different today for swimming, but if you want to get in contact with us with those guests, or want to write a review to the podcast, go to Apple Podcasts, write a review. So we wanted to thank Andrew Dix, the co-event director of the Wreck2Reef, episode 43 of the Stoned Heen View podcast. We hope it's a great day on February 13 for the 2021 12th edition of the Wreck2Reef, hosted by the Indented Head Yacht Club. This has been the Stoned Heen View for episode 43. We'll see you next time on the Stoned Heen View. Thank you.